This is my after action report for the Bronco Panzer III A. Oh, I wanted to like this one. I really did. It's my entry into the Barkus build, and that is for one of my closest YouTube friends. He's become, a guy I spend a lot of time with, and I would like the kit that I entered into a group build, which happens to be a review for Armorama, to have been pleasant, and this was not. Oddly, he built this kit at the exact same time I did, and had less problems than me. But I want to say out front of this that I build these things with my skill level, and my skill level is not where everyone else's is. Sometimes I do really nice work, and sometimes I screw up the easiest things in the world. I had a bad time with this. My major problems that I'll call out front is low fidelity of parts, vague instructions, and just poor engineering, to be honest. Over-engineering, like their ideas were bigger than their capabilities. Now, I haven't built a Bronco kit before, and I've heard over-engineering is what everybody would say. But what I took away was engineering that attempted to be intense, but they didn't have the manufacturing capabilities to back it up. So, as we do, let's go turret first. So I left it in two parts like this so that we could paint in the interior, and so we'll look at this separately as well. The gun assembly, a lot of it kind of just glued to each other, and that was the case for a lot of this kit. No peg and hole situation, just kind of like touching stuff and holding it. So it looks fine. This all comes out, by the way. So it looks fine, but it was very fragile, and probably still is. The MGs here, and I left some of the photo etch off of this kit, including in places like this for these things, the kind of vision ports that could go up. I skipped it because I was having a hell of a time with this kit, and I'd never done that on a review before. Skip something, but either it didn't get done or I skipped it. But like this MG ammo thing here, I don't have the other one on here. The MGs were incredibly fiddly. I'm not even sure they're done correctly. The instructions were so poor and from such a weird angle that I just was at some point guessing what I was supposed to be doing. They do look like they're in the correct place, but this is not how I'm used to dealing with things. Just very muddy detail and poor instructions. The seats were just as bad, if not worse. Like, if you can see this seat, and you've seen a lot of seats like it probably in any kind of Panzer IIIs or whatever, according to the instructions, there are holes to put pegs in to build this seat, and there should be a bar that goes here, but there aren't any because their molds aren't up to the fidelity to create that shape. So it was just a kind of cruddy looking, candy cane shape, and I just had to glue and hold the stuff together to create that seat. Like, the pegs weren't, the hole and pegs weren't really a thing. They were more of like a hope, like same with like this wheel right here. There was a peg, like a male thing on the end of it, and then it was just a peg. There's no hole to stick it in. So it would have been easier to just have a wheel and a peg and stick them together, but it was a wheel with a peg on the end, and so it was a positive and a positive. Like, it was a really weird thing to do. Or this here had no locator thing whatsoever. You just kind of glued it to that. To me, it seems like what a really awesome kit would have been 25 years ago. Pre-CAD maybe. Again, this part of the seat was just murder. There was a little bit of a locator for this, but these two things, I'm not even sure they're where they're supposed to be. And pieces like this secondary piece holding the seat were just as good as crummy flash, from what I could tell, and I just shape it into the thing that it looked like it was supposed to be. This part of the turret, this was a little bit difficult. They didn't really tell you correctly, because they don't lock in very well, how these pieces in here should have gone. So I didn't make any of these open because they didn't really line up correctly. Not a whole lot in the turret. The hatches were fine. This is actually probably one of the easier parts of the build itself, was just this assembly here. I have this guy off because I can't decide if I want him to be open or not, so he's just not even glued yet. Overall, the turret looks the part, but the bottom assembly of the turret and the gun was just ugh, not great. As for the hull, I started with the suspension, as the instructions tell you, and the first thing I noticed was that these coil springs cannot sit flat. So I spent an inordinate amount of time trying to make them perfect, not realizing at the time that this is just not the sort of build to do that. Now, with the wheels on, and I just glued everything on, because I was like, screw it. You can't really tell that badly, but they're not, you know, up to my standards of aligned. They actually were quite annoying. The wheels as well didn't really fit together correctly, so sometimes I would have to shave the parts that attach them and look up into my lights to make sure that these holes matched up so that they were correct. One of the sprockets lines up correctly when you glue it, and the other does not. The teeth stagger, so you then need to modify the sprocket so that the teeth actually can fit into the track legs. My friend Michael had to warn me about that. Apart from that, I guess the wheels and everything are right. I do remember these connections for the rollers being kind of filigree, but they weren't undoable. The fenders have some etch, and a little bit of that was skipped because I had an issue while doing the rear deck here. There's some clamp holders here and here, and they broke while I was bending it. And that's not a huge deal, but since there was 2 bends per thing, and I think I had 3 of the bends break, so I kept trying, and I was going to scratch build one other one. I guess my point is their smaller etch is just a little bit too fragile for me, and it would break on the first bend. Like, not over bending and correcting. It would just, I'd bend it and it would be off. It's like, that's weird. Not every piece, but some. So I kind of started doing less etch. You know, I consider it optional. These guys here worked out pretty well early on. Exhausts seemed to go together okay. It was weird, there was really no mounting point for that horn. I kind of just pushed it up against that. One major problem I had, and I'll show you very closely. So these little fellers here, right there, you can see some plastic and some etch and some more plastic. Some of that's scratch built, by the way, because of I just couldn't get what they had to work. That little thing that's glued to the front fender, kind of shaped like a hammer. And they were on Tiger 1 and they were on Panzer III, and basically they would just latch in to like, let's say here there'd be a little metal loop, and they gave you etch for this, but it broke. They give you it's just a little like loop shape, and then this thing would hook into it and it would be connected to this part, therefore not allowing this to flap up and down. Whatever they wanted me to do, that's their photo etch for it. And like in their diagram, it looked like you could put the etch inside of this thing. But in the end, I just glued it to the side of it because I didn't know what they wanted me to do. And the piece that they wanted me to glue it to on here was so small that I couldn't even differentiate it from the sprue gate. So I just made my own. It's kind of bent around, and since that piece broke, I just glued it there. It's unrefined, but it was the principle of the thing, and I was just trying to make it work. Dragon does these in one-piece styrene, so Dragon's version of the styrene would have the hammer piece and the little extender bit as one, and it's a lot more detailed or refined than the Bronco one. And there's kind of an example maybe you can see, and I'm going to bring in a Dragon Panzer III in a second so you can see just kind of molding comparisons, but I think that their technology wasn't up to even doing this, so they should have not included it. Like, that's the kind of beef I have with this kit. The etch grills seem fine. Apparently these might not have even been on the real vehicle, I found out after installing them, but that's not a big deal to me. So I did end up skipping those fender holders on the rear after I'd done the front ones. I'm like, whatever. I accomplished it once, and that's all you're going to get. The tracks are model cast in style, even model cast in color. They're fine. I tried to kind of get them done maybe faster than I should have, and I could have kept them workable, but because they're so small, the glue does tend to bleed and make them not work. Like, if this is Ryfield's model casting, I mean, they're perfect. Now, is that dependent upon weight? Because the heavier something is, the more likely it is to pull it down, and these are very light. However, I have areas where they just didn't work anyway, so I did the best I could to get some sag. I may even go back and just harden it with some more glue. I'm glad they're in there. I really do appreciate workable tracks, but you know, it doesn't make up for, in my opinion, the rest of the deficiencies with the plastic or the engineering or the instructions. Another thing I want to mention real quick is these tie downs. They're just that shape, and you just glue them down. There's nothing for them to set in. You just glue them to it. Now, I don't have a problem with that, but it's not what I'm used to. Like, that doesn't seem like what any of us are used to seeing with modern kits. For all the judging of companies like Ryefield and TACOM and Meng that I've done, because they're not Dragon, this was horrible. And that happened a lot with things on this, you know. Everything. We either had a tiny locator, which was kind of not as good as I'm used to, or none at all. So here, side by side, Panzer IIIs that I have reviewed for Armorama. The notorious Tauk Panzer III A that I gave a 60 to, and just ripped into shreds, and this. And building this made me think that this was the best couple days of my life. This was awful. I think anyone that's built Dragon Panzer IIIs can tell you, like, the molding and the engineering is next to flawless. What made me angry about this kit was business practice, tracks that didn't match, making me modify the thing, making me fill holes. I can't stand that, and that Panther kit I just did was even worse about it. So was I too harsh on this? Perhaps, because the whole time I'm building this Bronco kit, I'm remembering, and I'm looking over at this thing, because I still haven't painted it yet, it's just hanging out. And I'm like looking at how frankly beautiful the engineering is on this thing. Like, everything on it is like top notch. That was never the problem though. The problem with this kit was that Dragon already had these parts, and they phoned in the kit and called it a kit when it wasn't really a kit. It was just parts thrown in a box. But when you compare that to, I mean, you can see how soft this plastic is. This looks like a plastic model, whereas this looks like a miniature Panzer. They're not even comparable. I toughed through it, I guess you would say, and I did have to end up skipping a lot of stuff to get it done. And, you know, I had the ability to make it look tolerable, but since what I'm judging for my people, like the people that I make reviews for and the people that I hope read my stuff, are like me, I would think, and want to build something that will look awesome when they're done. And they want to build something that challenges them, yes, but does not spit in their face. And I found that these instructions weren't even of the same materials that I was holding, and I think this is probably the worst thing I've ever reviewed. So as a teacher, anything below a 60 is a fail. So I'm giving this a 55. Yeah, it looks cool. Panzer III A is an interesting vehicle. This model, though, is just terribly engineered.